Shopify grows your business no matter how far or big you grow. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Whether you're selling your fans' next favorite shirt or an exclusive piece of podcast merch, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Allbirds, Rothy's, Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds, and I'm here with Keith, co-star of my upcoming film, If, only in theaters May 17th. Do you want to tell people the big news? All right, I'll do it. Sign up now and you'll get unlimited for $15 a month and 6 months of Paramount Plus Essential Plan on us. MintMobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 equivalent to $15 per month. Unlimited over 40 gigabytes per month. Face lower speeds. Videos at 480p. Active Mint customers by 531.24 get 6 months of Paramount Plus Essential Plan. Auto renews after 6 months. Offer ends May 31st, 2024. Separate Paramount Plus registration required. Terms and conditions apply if rated PG.
This content may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion advised.
I'm not generally someone who believes in the supernatural, but that day in Devon will eternally be burned into my psyche as an omen. A warning from the universe that some places are better left undisturbed.
I'm a skeptic. To this day, this is the only unexplainable creepy thing I've seen that truly shook me to my core. And 13 years later, it still scares and disturbs me to tell the story.
From Killer Podcasts, true tales of horror, bizarre happenings, unexplainable events. This is Disturbed. Hello, and welcome back to the show. This week, we're bringing you 3 terrifying tales of experiences with terrifying creatures. The monsters from your nightmares, seen in the real world by real people. So sit back, listen closely, and dive into the horror. First, a story narrated by Paul Brown from Reddit user Pisky Wendigo. A terrifying encounter deep in the Mississippi swamps.
This isn't something I witnessed. I was told this story by one of the men who allegedly saw it. This guy had run with some questionable crowds and did what jobs he had to make money at times, if you get my drift. So he has a lot of stories. I mostly consider this a tall tale, but a part of me wonders, what if it is true? This guy is called Zed, and according to him, he had been finishing up some work down in Louisiana back in the late 1990s with his buddy, and had a few days to kill. They wanted to get some fishing and hunting in, albeit out of season. And one of the guys they had worked with gave them directions to a spot way back in the swamps and marshes, or the bayou, as it's more commonly called down there. They were told that in this area, they could fish without risking being caught by fish and game agents. He said one of the best things about this spot was that there were, oddly enough, never any alligators there. And this may sound like a perk, but it's a bit of a red flag, really. Anyways, one fine morning, they set out in their boat before the sun was up, navigating their way through the swamps. From what he described, this was a section that was close to the Mississippi border. Smugglers used this route to move various products across state lines, apparently. The two friends finally arrived at the spot after a few hours and some detours, their way of not admitting they got lost. They turned off the motor on their boat and started fishing. The trees were just thick enough to prevent you from being seen from overhead, and they were essentially in a huge inlet that was somewhat sheltered from the rest of the bayou and had the start of solid land along two sides of it. Now, by solid land, that also meant you had to walk across 10 to 15 feet of muck that could suck your boots off before you actually got to solid ground. Now, according to Zed, as the day progressed, the fishing wasn't going great, but they still had beer, so they weren't inclined to go anywhere. They both noted that there were no alligators, just as the guy had said. And normally you could spot them lurking around or, sunning themselves, but they were just utterly gone from the spot, as were most of the big fish, it seemed. It was at this point they observed a herd of feral hogs emerge from the undergrowth on one side of the lagoon, make their way to the thick muck, and commence rolling and rooting around in it to their heart's content. Zed and his buddies slowly angled their boat closer, as they had sidearms with them and certainly had no issues with getting wild pork instead of fish if the opportunity was there. The hogs were leery but not afraid, keeping the humans in their line of sight as they frolicked. Zed saw that they had no real way to get a hog if they shot it there, so they just floated along and watched for a good opportunity. Instead, they saw something else entirely. That's when they saw the mud start to move. Now, Zed knew instantly it wasn't an alligator, as an alligator would be flailing around in the mud trying to reach the hogs. The only way he could describe it was something was pushing its way through the muck like a mostly submerged bulldozer, creeping up on the pigs. Zed and his buddy watched as this thing slowly approached a cluster of hogs who had noticed the movement but seemed more curious than afraid. One of them, a pig that Zed estimated was about 175 pounds, was the furthest out in the muck and made the mistake of attempting to sniff at whatever the intruder was. Zed said that quicker than they could react, something lunged out from the thing and attached to the pig's head and face. As the pig thrashed and tried to jump back, letting out the most blood-curdling scream they'd ever heard, the thing was hauled partially out of the muck and came into better view. Zed realized it was an alligator snapping turtle, of proportions he had never heard of. He's seen the one they keep at the Bass Pro Shop that got big enough that it cracked its tank and had to get a new one, and he said that was like comparing a Chihuahua to a pit bull. And it was still partially obscured by the muck that was covering it, but Zed swore its shell had to be at least the size of the hood of a Volkswagen Beetle. He was an extreme car enthusiast, so he knew his vehicles. He guessed it was well over 500 pounds. The turtle started backing up into deeper water, dragging the pig with it. Zed said from what they could see, the turtle's head was so big that it was able to fit its jaws partially around the pig's skull, and its beak was now essentially acting as a meat hook. It was about a 30-second fight to drag the pig out into the lagoon, but Zed said it was clear the pig never had a chance. The turtle dragged it out into the water, and the pig made one last desperate attempt to break free. Apparently hearing something screaming underwater one last time is as unnerving as you'd imagine, and Hollywood doesn't get the sound right. After that, it just went absolutely quiet. According to Zed, he and his buddy sat there for a minute, just processing what they had seen. And except for the froth on the top of the water and the stirred up mud, there was no sign that anything had just happened. The other hogs had fled as soon as their comrade was attacked, and the swamp was completely silent, other than the faint hum of bayou bugs. Zed and his buddy booked it out of there. They couldn't go to Fish and Game and describe what they saw, since they weren't supposed to be in that area in the first place. But they did fill in their acquaintance on why there were no alligators in that area. As far as Zed knew, nobody else has reported sightings of this colossal turtle. He said that it was big enough that if it caught a person unawares, it could easily overpower and kill a human the same way it did that pig. I've never traveled deep into the bayou, so who knows what could be lurking out of sight.
Our next story is told by Kim Andrews about a horrifying experience in the British countryside.
When I was 16, my life changed forever. I'd broken my back in a bad accident and was bedridden for months, unable to move. The pain was excruciating, but the psychological toll was even worse. Being trapped in a hospital bed, staring at the same four walls day after day, I was determined to recover and get my life back. As soon as the doctors cleared me, I decided I needed to get out into nature to truly heal my mind and body. My mum agreed that a camping trip down in the beautiful Devon countryside might be just what I needed. She dropped me off at a remote forested area with my tent, some supplies, and a portable charger to keep my phone powered up. I'd scoped out what looked like the perfect isolated spot to set up camp. Sure, it seemed to be on private land, but it was getting late and I didn't want to risk camping too close to a public area. I quickly pitched the tent as darkness fell, cracked open a cider, and fired up YouTube on my phone as I settled in to relax. That's when things began to seem strange. I noticed my phone battery was draining faster than it should, even while charging. Strange, but I tried not to think too much of it. That's when I heard something. It sounded like heavy footsteps tramping through the underbrush, rapidly getting closer. My heart pounded. I must have counted at least 30 footfalls. Was it an aggressive hiker? Or worse, a property owner with a shotgun? In a panic, I unzipped the tent and stuck my hands up, preparing to face whoever was out there. But there was nothing. Just the eerie silence of the forest. The footsteps that had been nearly on top of me just seconds before simply faded into an unnatural nothingness. All at once, a deep sense of dread washed over me. Something was horribly wrong here. I turned my head slowly, my gut telling me I wasn't alone. About 20 feet away, in the dark, was something barely moving, but undoubtedly alive. A massive, skeletal beast that stood 5 feet tall and vaguely resembling a hairless, emaciated dog on all fours. Its blank face was frozen in a permanent bestial snarl, lips pulled back to expose rows of jagged teeth. I've never felt such primal, wordless terror. Fight or flight didn't even enter into my mind. I instinctively scrambled backwards into the tent and zipped it up, curling into a tight ball on the floor. My mind had simply shut down, overloaded by the sight of that thing. After who knows how long, I finally thought to check my phone in desperation. It was completely drained, so I frantically swapped in the portable charger. An agonizing 50 minutes crawled by before it finally turned back on with just 3% battery remaining. With shaking hands, I managed to text my mum a frantic plea for help, dropping my location pin and a pre-arranged code phrase for an emergency extraction. The phone died again before she could respond. All I could do was hunker down in my sleeping bag and try not to imagine what sort of ungodly abomination was lurking just outside those thin nylon walls. The next few hours passed like a waking nightmare. Every minor sound, A snapping twig, a rustling bush sent panicked visions through my mind of that towering, bony creature closing in for the kill. Finally, I heard the blessed rumble of an engine in the distance. Risking a peek outside, I nearly collapsed with relief at the sight of my mum's car pulling up. Without a moment's delay, I grabbed my bag and sprinted straight for her open arms, leaving the tent and all my other belongings behind without a second thought. To this day, I have no rational explanation for what I encountered out in those woods. Maybe it was a delirious hallucination, or a vivid waking dream brought on by stress and fatigue. Maybe it was just an unfortunate trick of light and shadow playing on my already frayed nerves. All I know is that I've never felt such abject, primal terror before or since. My mind was robbed of all ability for rational thought or action. Only the most basic instincts for self-preservation remained. I'm not generally someone who believes in the supernatural, but that day in Devon will eternally be burned into my psyche as an omen, a warning from the universe that some places are better left undisturbed by human trespassers. If I'd pressed on with my ill-fated camping excursion, I shudder to think what other shadowy monstrosities might have surfaced from the murky depths of that ancient woodland.
You're listening to Disturbed. We'll be right back.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
This episode is brought to you by Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. In breaking news, leading scientists worldwide are conducting experiments to determine if Reese's Peanut Butter Cups are the perfect combination of peanut butter and chocolate. However, it appears the study was inconclusive, as the scientists couldn't help but eat all the Reese's. Because when you want something sweet, you can't do better than Reese's. Find Reese's now at a store near you.
Welcome back to the podcast. Our final story is from r/backwoodscreepy, a chance encounter with the beast of Bray Road. Where else but in Ohio?
Manaway, Ohio is a railroad town, boasting a creepy town center with an old railway station surrounded by a rural landscape peppered with brick buildings, sprawling properties with dense woods and cornfields, guarded by sunny farmhouses of varying ages and sizes. It has a nice high school and is on the nicer end of the spectrum as far as rural towns go. 44 South has only one lane in each direction. I made this drive regularly to visit my then-boyfriend. I knew the drive well, and it was an area I felt comfortable and safe in. I usually had music on and enjoyed the drive and the fresh air. One day, in the middle of summer 2011, I was driving on 44 South into Manaway, making my usual trip. It was mid-afternoon with plenty of sun on a beautiful, clear day. As I was driving, I passed an area I knew well that was just a few miles from my destination. On my right, there were houses on 2 to 3 acre lots with big front yards, longer driveways, and attached garages shaded by tall trees with thick foliage. Everyone along this stretch had dense woods in their backyard. On my left, across the road, there was a cornfield that butted up to a deep, grassy drainage culvert. A flat area of grass about 3 feet across met the road before dipping into the culvert and vanishing into the corn. This went on for roughly a mile. I saw something that looked strange up ahead. There was something on the opposite side of the road where the cornfields were. I couldn't quite make it out, but it was a large, brown, hairy mass, right next to the road. It was too dark in color to be a dead deer. Maybe an escaped cow? No, not that either. Something about this mass on the side of the road was unlike anything I'd ever seen, and I just couldn't figure it out. I saw it move. Maybe whatever it was wasn't roadkill, and it was just an animal grazing on the side of the road in the culvert. I rolled my window down to get a better look. I slowed down a little as I passed by, and all at once I realized what I was seeing. The hairy mass was a dead dog being eaten by another dog. The biggest dog I've ever seen with the freakiest eyes. They were empty and hungry with a pale glow. As I passed by, this thing pulled its face out of the dog carcass it was eating to look up at my car and locked eyes with me. It looked right through me, and it felt like pure evil. I passed it in my car at about 40 miles per hour. As I started to freak out and roll up my window, I checked my mirror for a double take because I absolutely did not believe what I saw. In my mirror, I could see that its head was already back down again, eating. It was totally unbothered by my car. I slowed down, then sped up, then slowed down again, then sped up again. I wanted to know what I saw, but I was completely freaked out. I looked for the nearest driveway on my right side, maybe 50 to 75 yards away, and peeled into the driveway to turn around and go back. As I put my car in park, I saw that a man was home sitting in a lawn chair outside his garage facing parallel to the road, blissfully unaware of what was just up the road behind him. His 2 Labradors ambled about happily. He saw me and assumed I was just using his driveway to turn around, but became unsettled when I drove almost all the way up the driveway, parked my car, and got out still freaking out. "Take your dogs inside! You need to get inside your house!" I shouted. I told him what I saw, and he got up out of his lawn chair to look where I was pointing, but the trees at the edge of his property blocked the scene from view, and it was just a bit too far away. I got back in my car and kept warning him to get his dogs inside. If our places had been exchanged, I probably would have called the cops on someone who came ripping into my driveway rambling about some wild animal in a panic. I was terrified and full of adrenaline, and no regard for ruining this guy's peaceful afternoon. I don't remember how I left it with him, but I got back in my car, backed out onto 44, and headed back north from the way I came to get a better look at this thing, still from the safety of my moving car. I passed where it was, and it was gone. I drove back and forth one more time in disbelief at the whole thing. The beast was nowhere in sight. But there was a hole in the corn stalks where this thing had clearly dragged the dog away to finish eating it away from the road. I remember sitting stopped on the side of the road, staring at this hole in the cornfield. It looked far too innocent to do justice to what I had just seen. No one driving by would even notice it. I had my head on a swivel around my car and locked my doors, but something told me I wouldn't see it again and to get out of there, so I did. When I passed the house again, the man and his dogs weren't in the yard anymore and the garage was closed. Completely rattled, I called my then boyfriend, but he didn't answer. When I got to his house, I was so shaken up and couldn't make sense of what I had seen. He still lived with his folks in a cold, creaky farmhouse in Ravenna. I did not feel safe in the house that night. Even though I was in my early 20s, the incident brought back all my childhood fears of being afraid of the dark and what was under the bed. I just felt like this creature could be lurking anywhere. I remember this like it was yesterday, and I've only shared this story with a few friends. Whatever this thing was, it was built like a dog, but bigger than any dog I've ever seen. It was very dark brown with dirty fur. I've considered that it might have been a black bear with mange, but it didn't move like a bear. And the piercing eyes in broad daylight, those were something else. It was a canine, not Bigfoot or any other common myth that I'm aware of. I hadn't done too much research into what it could be because I was scared to know. I thought of the black dog of English legend or even a werewolf. I had no idea. It was big, at least 200 pounds, maybe bigger. The dog it was eating was also quite large. Then, someone told me about the Beast of Bray Road, a huge wolf-like creature with glowing eyes. It frequents woods and cornfields and eats large animal carcasses. This description fits perfectly. I looked it up and holy shit, this is absolutely what I saw. I'm a skeptic. To this day, this is the only unexplainable creepy thing I've seen with my own two eyes that truly shook me to my core. For months, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and 13 years later, it still scares and disturbs me to tell the story. There's weird stuff out there in the rural Midwest.
Want more Disturbed? Check out our Patreon for member-exclusive content, early merch access, and other cool perks. I'm your host, Doug Bailey, and this has been Disturbed, a production of Killer Podcasts and part of the Evergreen Network. For more paranormal and true crime shows, visit killerpodcasts.com. Follow our social channels at Disturbed Podcast on Instagram or Disturbed_pod on Twitter. If you enjoyed the show, please consider subscribing and reviewing on your favorite listening platform. Share your own true horror story at disturbedpodcast.com. Music by Epidemic Sound and by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Our producers are Noah Fouts and Elizabeth Flood. Our audio engineer is Nathan Corson. Executive producers Bridget Coyne and Gerardo Orlando. Until next time, stay safe out there.
24 hours ago, I found out the person that I'd been dating and seeing for the last 6 months is a con man.
That is my sister Emma. Andrew Tonks's lies had been so convincing, she'd invested $300,000 with him. However, the tables were about to turn on Andrew. What he didn't know was that Emma had discovered his real identity. But to get any chance of justice, Emma had to act like it was business as usual. Coming up in this series,
and that's when murder, all this stuff goes through my mind. I'm really, really scared.
I'm assuming Sarah has watched too much Netflix and figures I've been defrauding you. Couldn't be further from the truth.
That's what this was, a real-life story that seems so unbelievable, but it was actually true.
A true story that all starts with one simple swipe to the right. I'm Sarah Ferris.
And I'm Emma Ferris, and this is my story, Conning the Con.